Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Gamersphere podcast. Today, inside the sphere, we have Gene Mocsy. I may have messed up the pronunciation of that, Gene.
No problem. It's mochi. It's Hungarian.
Mochi. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Gene is one of the developers on 1954 Alcatraz, a new adventure game which just recently released on Steam I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We've been
Yeah.
playing it over at Gamersphere and are in the middle of our review, and Gene was so very kind to agree to join me today for an interview. So how are you doing, Gene?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are things over there?
Good, 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 good. Very,
Cool.
very busy. Again, I just want to extend a personal thanks to you for agreeing to call in for the interview.
No problem. I saw your little preview review. I'm glad you liked it. You're digging it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is pretty awesome. And I'm not. I'm sure you saw in the review. I am not. Adventure games are not my typical
Yeah.
staple. So it's
Excellent.
pretty
We're
awesome.
drawing you in.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe kind of talk through some of the key events that led up to the creation of 1954 Alcatraz?
It would be my pleasure. I'm in the San Francisco area. Most of my life I've been here, and I worked at EA, what is now called Visceral Games,
Oh,
for
wow.
about 6 years.
Awesome.
And then after that, I went to a small adventure game company called Autumn Moon Entertainment, and we did a couple of adventure games called A Vampire Story and Ghost Pirates of Vuju Island.
Okay.
And I wrote dialogue and I helped script those. So Autumn Moon sadly shut down, but on the last day, my boss, Bill Tiller, said I could use their adventure game engine, but only for 100 years. And after that, I have to renegotiate with them.
That's awesome.
So I was like, fantastic. This is like, they handed me the keys to the spaceship or something, and I can finally make my own game. And since I've been in the area, I've visited Alcatraz a bunch of times, and it was like, it's a huge puzzle, just sitting in the middle of the bay. No one has ever escaped, supposedly, and it just seemed like a perfect setting. And also, just like personal family history, my dad escaped from a prison in the 50s. So
Wow.
that's been like a family story that's been in my head. So I've always been kind of obsessed with prison breaks. And so I just put it all together and I roughed it out in the old engine for my job. And then I connected with Daedalic Entertainment at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and they were interested. And so we moved ahead from there.
Okay. Wow. Awesome. That's a quite amazing story. Can you could you mention maybe some of the projects that you worked on while you were at Visceral?
Yeah, sure. I was on Godfather 1 and part of Godfather 2, The Simpsons, the video game, a James Bond game called Everything or Nothing, really good one. You should check it out. It was like the PS2 era.
Okay.
A couple of unannounced games that were sort of put on hiatus, and a couple years on Tiger Woods Golf.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty widely varied background as far as
Yeah, that was good. It was nice. It's like urban environments and then natural worlds and a whole bunch of different settings, and you got to move around from different teams. So I met a lot of people.
wow.
It was good.
Wow, awesome. So, can you go a little bit into how exactly the arrangement wound up developing between you and Daedalic and your company is called Irresponsible Games, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And I'm also curious to know kind of what was like the work breakdown between yourself as a developer and that I guess they have an in-house development team that's part of
hmm
the publisher.
Yeah, no, they have fantastic artists there. They're really amazing, and they really know their adventure games. That's what they've been, delivering for a lot of years now, and keeping the genre alive over there. So, um, I wrote all the dialogue, about 90% of the dialogue actually. About 10% came from them for specific puzzles, and I rewrote. But I wrote most of the dialogue. I did most of the design. I laid out the backgrounds, and I did the very first iteration of the character designs. And then I scripted it all in my old engine, so it was fully playable from start to finish. So I could present it to them and go, this is the game. Here it is. And I need money to upgrade the backgrounds, the characters, the music, which is by Pedro Macedo Camacho. I know you liked it. It is fantastic. But that required money that I didn't have myself. And voice recording. So Daedalic was like, cool, yeah, I think they wanted an American type game for their portfolio, And they took it on and found all these fantastic artists from around the world to kick in and help with various aspects. And then when it came time to finally release the game, they decided that it might be better to actually port it over to their in-house engine, which they're developing right now, which is a Unity-based engine.
Okay.
So they took what I had roughed out in my engine, and they got their talented engineers and artists and designers to put it into their game engine. And so that was a lot of work, but it turned out well, and that's what you see in the release.
Okay, that's awesome. So it now existing and riding on the Unity engine, does that make it that it would seem that would make it technically feasible for that to then be ported to the Xbox One or PlayStation 4 architecture?
Yeah, it's possible, but at the moment it's just PC and Mac. I know, I totally like you. I would love to have it everywhere. That'd be fantastic. And like iOS, like on an iPad, that would be amazing.
Right.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
But at the moment there are no plans. But if there's enough interest, you never know.
Well, you can feel free to let those guys know.
Okay.
Some of our writers on the site and some of the readers on the site that was their first question when I posted the initial impression was,
Yeah, I
hey,
saw that.
is this coming to the PlayStation Network? Yeah, that
That'd be cool.
would be absolutely awesome. So, can you talk a little bit about what were your inspirations? I know you mentioned the family history piece, but
Yeah.
that and were there any previous games that you'd either worked on or had played yourself that kind of inspired you in some of the things that you put in Alcatraz?
hmm Let's see. I know. When I decided to do it as this Prison Break story, I did my due diligence and I played all the escape games I could find. So I know I played Prisoner of War, The Great Escape. I think there was one based on the TV series Prison Break.
Okay.
I don't know if I just said that. Then I think there was one based on Chicken Run, possibly, and I think there was one other POW type story. So I was just finding out what they did, what was fun, what was not so fun, and then for the San Francisco side, like capturing a real city in specific time period. I checked out the Blackwell series, which is an adventure game series set in New York. It's a detective story,
Okay.
and it's in the present. But then there's also one game that's set in like the '60s, and it does a real good. It captures the feeling of a city really well. And Dave Gilbert is the creator, and he does New York. So I wanted to do San Francisco.
Okay. Okay. Um, and how about historical inspirations? I know, like I said, you mentioned your own family history, but did you kind of deep dive into the history of San Francisco? I mean, to me
Yeah.
the character of the city, um, and a lot of the supporting cast is one of the most amazing things about the game. And I'm just wondering kind of how you develop the feel for that.
Thank you. Glad you like it. Yeah, totally. Jumped into the beat scene. Yeah, absolutely. It's I go to North Beach all the time, and I go to like City Lights bookstore and Cafe Trieste and all these places that are legendary. And if I were in the 50s, I don't know if I would be cool enough to hang out with everybody in the beat scene. But through wish fulfillment in games, you can do that. You can be as cool as they were. So I read everything I could, absolutely. And luckily, like all the beat novels are super autobiographical and, trying to tell the truth as it was. And so you get a lot of great real detail. And then they cross-reference each other so you can confirm, oh, this person was at that party. And then here's another view of that same party from another person's point of view.
Okay.
And since you're playing as Christine in North Beach, I tried to also make sure I read all the women of the beat scene.
Okay.
And they're kind of neglected a little bit in history, but Diane DePrima was a San Francisco beat author and poet who has some really racy little memoirs. Joyce Johnson wrote some memoirs. A couple of people who were with Kerouac. Carolyn Cassidy also wrote. So I read all their stuff as well to get the point of view of a woman in the beat scene as well.
Okay. And I'm just going to go out and admit my ignorance because I didn't have a chance to look this up before we got on the interview. But can you kind of briefly define what exactly is the beat scene and what is meant by a beat writer?
Yeah, no problem. Well, they kind of most of them came out of New York in the late 40s, and it was kind of a scene, rebelling against the establishment and against convention. They found jazz music. They found marijuana. They found a bunch of them were gay, and a bunch of them were like small-time crooks. So it was sort of like the underground, the subterranean world, and they found each other. And then a lot of them moved to San Francisco in the 50s.
Okay.
And they were writing rebellious novels about themselves and about their sex life and about things that people actually did, but you didn't get in mainstream, press and movies and books. And they were kind of, subterranean rebels that kind of just wanted to be left alone. Okay. And they were kind of like, the birth, I don't know, birth of the cool, I guess.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, so you obviously were kind of constrained on when you could set the piece because it obviously had to be during a time period that Alcatraz was actually open. But why specifically this time period? Was there anything that specific that kind of lured you to that point in time?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was somewhere between 1933 and 63, I believe. That was when Alcatraz was open, so I needed to pick some year there. I was thinking about that. I mean, in the 30s, I could have gotten Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly and some cool 30s gangsters, but I think I wanted to do a little later in a time period that there's still a lot in San Francisco that's from that time, and just also, the beat period. I wanted to live it and see what it was like and get inside of that.
Okay. So you kind of alluded to it in some of the pieces that you were talking about before. One thing that I found particularly interesting is there's a lot of what I interpret as social commentary in the game. You mentioned the homosexuals. I myself am a minority in an interracial marriage. So I found that particularly interesting because there's not a lot of that in video games at all, and I also found it interesting the choice on the amount of playtime that you spend as Christine. On our own website. There's an ongoing series that one of our writers, Ophelia, has been writing about women in video games and how they're portrayed in video games and how female gamers are perceived. So I was just kind of curious as to was that primarily to as realistically render the social scene in San Francisco, or were there kind of specific points you wanted to get across in that part of the game design?
Good question. You play about half the time as Joe on the island and half the time as Christine in North Beach, so it's pretty 50-50 split.
Okay.
So you're going to have a lot more to do with Joe when it comes to the actual escape. It's going to be all him for a while there later in the game. I think I was just trying to reflect what I see in San Francisco. It's a pretty diverse place, and it would be kind of silly to make a game about San Francisco without, with just all straight white males. That would be kind of dumb.
Right.
It wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
But I was trying not to really hit the social commentary because it doesn't seem like that doesn't really often work in a piece of art, in a play or a movie or something. If like this is a game about social commentary, it's not going to be much fun usually. And I feel like you just kind of get it by osmosis. You're helping different couples with their love problems. You're talking to whatever painters and musicians, and it doesn't really matter to the game who they are or where they come from. Everybody has the same problems as everyone else, and maybe in a way that's kind of making a statement. Like it's just silly to think that groups are any different. Sorry, I'm just wandering off topic there.
No, that's fine.
But originally I think that I was imagining that Joe was a white guy and sort of a Robert Mitchum type character, and then I was using a placeholder model from this old game that I did called Ghost Pirates, and it has this sort of Afro-Caribbean guy as one of the leads, and so he was my placeholder Joe. And after a while, I was just like, that's pretty much Joe. That's him. That's fine. And so I'm like, okay, yeah. So from now on, he's African American. And then I knew this excellent actor, Reg Clay, who's in the area. He's African American. I knew he'd do a great job. So I was like, sweet, I got that settled. And then Dedelic was, just really cool about it, real casual. Didn't make me change anybody. And that's something that might have happened if I'd been at a bigger company,
Right.
Since I was just starting this all out by myself, I could do whatever the hell I wanted, and there was no target audience or, I don't know, board of directors to go, well, you should really have, you know, a white guy with a shaved head on your cover or whatever, like they always do.
Right. No, and that's a great articulation because I think as I've been playing the game, I've kind of had to pause at certain points as I've been trying to formulate my thoughts for the review, and I've kind of been grasping, at my own articulation of exactly what I was feeling and how to put into words what I was experiencing. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Is
Hmm.
what you wound up doing was putting that, if it is social commentary or whatever, just a description of a sociological description of the culture at that time. It it places it in front of the player, but it's not overt and it's not deliberate, and therefore it does not come off as contrived. Because I mean, if it, I mean, I again, I struggled to articulate exactly what I was feeling, but if I had felt it was contrived, I definitely would have sensed that.
Cool.
And I didn't. So yeah, so it's just an awesome realization of that design. You mentioned the voice actors
Hmm.
and the music, and you mentioned that because I think you mentioned that you read my first impressions, and I was so impressed by the way the music is woven so
Yeah.
tightly into the game. Did you personally interact with the people working on that and the composer and the voice actors?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Pedro worked on those two Autumn Moon games that I did.
Okay.
So he's like part of the group. And it was great that he had time to do this with us. And he was able to record with a real orchestra. He's over in Madeira, Portugal,
Okay.
and then also with a jazz band. I think he has the brain to be able to do both like 50s music, orchestral music, and also the cool and West Coast kind of jazz. So yeah, that was amazing, and I'm so glad that he had time to do that. Um, and then the voice actors, yeah, about half of them, like the two leads and a lot of the supporting roles, were friends of mine from the theater scene here in San Francisco.
Okay.
And Reg, I'd done a lot of theater with, and then Heidi Kobara, who did the heroine, I knew from a short film we had done together. So I got them all into the recording studio, which was awesome. But then the other half were all really experienced actors who had done a bunch of Telltale games. And so when I got the budget, then we were able to get a lot of really strong supporting actors, and we used Bay Area Sound, which is the recording studio that Telltale uses. So well, I imagine you probably know who they are, but they're huge in the adventure game world, and The Walking Dead was a recent hit of theirs.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So Dedelic I mean, so was the game primarily produced out of San Francisco? And the reason I'm asking is I thought Dedelic was a German company or
Yeah,
okay.
that's right. That's right. Hamburg, Germany. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was just the magic of Skype. We were just always simultaneously working in San Francisco and over in Hamburg.
Okay.
And I went over there for like 3 months, and met with the team and set things up and showed them the game and answered questions and things like that. So it was kind of cool though, because of the time difference, that there was always somebody working on the game 24 hours.
Right. Right. Oh, that's awesome. So going back to the to the social aspects of the game, were there any? And I know you mentioned, if you had been at a big publisher, those are definitely questions you would have had to answer, um,
Yeah.
in some things that are portrayed in the game. So did that not come up at all in working with Dedelic, or even with you personally? Were there points in the development cycle where you were concerned about
Mhm.
how the game would be received for those social aspects?
They were very cool about it, actually. Yeah, I know, and some people were saying, Can you even show blood in German games?" I think it's relaxed a little bit, and it's rated for 16 years old and over. So I told them, this is a prison story, so there's gonna be stabbing, there's gonna be death, there's gonna be violence. We can't get around that, and they were totally cool with it. I think I pitched it as I said, it's sort of like a Coen Brothers movie.
Okay.
There's like great characters, funny stuff, and then whoa, shit, total horror, total violence, and then but I think that sounded like something that they wanted. I think we cut out some swearing, and we couldn't get some nude scenes, but that was just financially because you'd have to model all new nude characters, and we just didn't have the budget.
Okay.
otherwise, otherwise the Germans were actually cooler about nudity than Americans. You know, it's like that weird European split thing where they're not so good about violence, and rightfully so.
Right.
But nudity, they would have been totally fine with if we'd been able to afford it.
That's awesome. How about so right, I think most people will be familiar with, or you can kind of glean, what you're getting character-wise in terms of Joe and Christine. How about the supporting characters? Were there? I know sometimes, particularly with movie types and television show types, the creators sometimes talk about, these little bit characters that they had planned on kind of not being a big deal,
Uh,
but over the course of development and production, they become really enamored with the role that small bit part winds up growing into. Was there anything like that for you in Alcatraz?
yeah, I guess there were. A lot of the characters have story arcs that kind of wrap up, but some of them are sort of left out in the open at the end. So I really, yeah, I would like to find out what happens next to a couple of characters. There's a painter, Bernadette, in San Francisco, and I know she's just about to get into a big studio show, so she could suddenly become famous. And does she sell out? I don't know. And there's Chiquita on the island is just a totally different character than I've ever seen before, and the voice actor wants a sequel. So well, there's no talk of sequels yet, but
Okay.
we would both like to see if that character gets out or not. If maybe there's a second break, who knows? And Dale, the car thief, uh, definitely has his own point of view in the world, and I would I would just like to see what terrible problems he gets himself into next. So yeah, a lot of them seem to have more story than I had time to get in.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and as a gamer, of course, if the game's good and you emotionally connect to it, you wind up developing those feelings. And I know for me right now, playing as Christine, like I dread when I walk into a building and Dale is there. I dread having to interact with him.
Well, that's kind of interesting for a guy though to play, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you have to. Oh my God, this is what it's like from the other side.
Right, right, absolutely. Um, and then, so anything you were maybe not necessarily unhappy with in how the game came out, but what are maybe some key things that you saw in the final build of the game that you're kind of like, hey, the next time I do an adventure game, I'm going to do this different, or I really wish I had locked in this one variation on a theme that I'd put in.
Hmm. Difficult question. Yeah, let me think. Um, yeah, I mean, it's probably like everybody. I can see something and I only see what I would have done differently. It's hard for me to get distance yet.
Right, right, right.
um, I, yeah, I mean, some technical things. I was just limited by the engine to have a lot of sort of static. It's like one wide master shot for a lot of scenes, and I wish I could have had, I don't know, horizontal length so you could pan back and forth over a long vista. I don't know. That's a technical thing. That may not actually be what you're asking about, but I would have liked. Uh, Gosh, I don't know. I don't want to tell you because then you're you're going to see these things. Um, I'll say one thing that we struggled with for a while between the two engines and everything. It's again, it's kind of a strange thing, but lighting is super important to me,
Right.
like the environment and the lighting. So we were limited by the old engine in what we could do, and then when we got into Unity, there were a bunch of new possibilities, and they were trying out this sort of toon shaded shadow effect for a while, but it was very strong, and it was hard to match with the backgrounds, and since the backgrounds are 2D painted, they're not quite in reality, and then you've got 3D lights, and so it was I think they succeeded in the end. The lighting matches the mood and lights matches the background. But I would love to do more cool, like noirish effects with lighting and have like, the patterned shadow through the Venetian blinds cast over the character and the
Okay.
background and giant big, Orson Welles type shadows on walls as you're running through a nighttime alley or something. I don't know. Someday, maybe.
That's awesome. So, Gene, what about you? What are you can you mention anything that you're working on now, or kind of what's next for you, game wise?
Thank you for asking. I did the in-game dialogue and co-designed the gameplay for an iOS adventure game. It's called Perils of Man, and it has a free demo out right now. And that's looking very cool. You play as a young Swiss girl who ends up traveling through time and space, and you'll have to play it to find out more. And then, yeah, I've got like a million ideas like everybody else. I've got a couple of things that I've sort of roughed out with friends, but it just is a matter of finding free time for everybody. And no big, huge projects at the moment. I'm just kind of, finishing up publicity for Alcatraz. And then I kind of have to like clean my apartment and clean out my garage and just like clear the decks. I'm done. It took a while to get this done, and so now it's a fresh start. I'm free.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And if you can't nail it down to a specific date, but just kind of rough timeline, when are you projecting Perils of Man would actually be released for iOS?
They say at the end of this year.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
very awesome, very awesome. Gene, anything else that you wanted to cover, or anything else that you want to let the fans know about before we wrap up?
If you like the game, check out some of the novels from the beat scene, and there's also a bunch of movies that have come out recently, On the Road and Howl and Big Sur. So I hope we can remember that era and keep it alive.
All right, well, great. Well, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. I
Pleasure.
really appreciate it.
Well, thanks.
This is a very big deal for for the Gamesphere site. So.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
and I look forward to checking out Perils of Man when it comes out and keeping up with anything else that you do in the video game scene.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Gene.
Okay.
All right.
See you around.
All right.